Hello and welcome to WJTS-Inform. Let's find out about how can you cut onions without crying. And let's find out about other root vegetables. In this edition of WJTS-Inform, joining me in the studio is Jan Dougan. She is the Extension Educator for the Du Bois County Purdue Extension Service. Jan, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Bill. It's great to be here.
Well, we're going to talk about root vegetables.
Yes, we are.
What are root vegetables?
Root vegetables. Consider any vegetable that you eat the plant part, the root is the part that you eat. So when you think about that, we think about carrots, we think about beets, garlic, onion, rutabaga, sweet potatoes, and probably parsnips, maybe a few others, but those are the ones I can think of.
Okay. Horseradish, that's one, isn't it?
I'm not sure. I guess it would be considered a vegetable. I would have to actually check on that.
If I eat enough of it, it's a vegetable, so it fills my plate.
Wow.
Okay, well,
okay.
No, horseradish you can only do so much of. All right, let's talk first of all about sweet potatoes.
Okay, sweet potatoes. I actually brought a couple with me today. So this is a sweet potato. You know, some people call them or want to call them a yam. A yam and a sweet potato are really two different things.
They are.
They do grow some yams, I think about Louisiana, but in the southern parts of the United States, there are some yams that are grown, but yams are originally from Africa, and sweet potatoes are what most of us use and eat over yams, but we do sometimes call them that. So it's a great orange vegetable. And if you remember, we should try to get more vegetables in our diet every day. And at least 2 times a week, we should try to get an orange vegetable.
And how many other orange vegetables are there?
Well, can you name any others?
A carrot. Okay,
a carrot.
Now that I think about it, carrot, sweet potato, that might be it.
Yeah, there aren't too many,
No,
are there? So that's why, you know, I think it's wonderful that we often think of sweet potatoes in the fall of the year. However, sweet potatoes are available to us year-round. They might not be locally produced sweet potatoes. They might be you might not have potatoes from your garden year-round if you grew sweet potatoes, but you can purchase them in the grocery store. So if you do, you want to look for a sweet potato that's, you know, a nice shape. You want to look for one that doesn't have too many blemishes on it. You want to look for one that's solid and no spoiled spots or anything like that. If you're going to bake a sweet potato, I think the more uniform in size and shape that you can get those potatoes, the more evenly those potatoes will be baked for serving your family. You do keep more nutrients if you keep the skin on when baking or preparing the sweet potato. So that's probably the most common way that we do sweet potatoes in food preparation is we bake them, but you could bake them in the oven, you could bake them in the microwave, you know, people also roast sweet potatoes. So if we were going to roast a sweet potato, we would want to peel it. First of all, of course, we want to wash the outer side, and we want to use a scrub brush of some kind to make sure that we're getting as much of the dirt off as possible so that there aren't any pathogens on there that we could get sick from. So we want to make sure that it's clean. And then when we say wash, we mean cool running water. We don't mean soap and water, okay? And you don't need any special preparation for washing, just cool running water and a brush, vigorously brushing it to get it clean. And then if you peel it, and then you could cut it into uniform cubes, and you could roast it in the oven like at 425 degrees for maybe 35 minutes, or you could create fries, strips.
Sweet potato fries are a big thing now.
Yes, they are. One of my favorite ways to do sweet potato fries is to go ahead and wash the potato, peel it, slice it into fries, and then I toss it in a bowl with some either canola oil is my favorite to toss it in because that's a heart-healthy oil, and then put it on a cookie sheet in the oven, 425 degrees. In about 30 minutes, you've got great sweet potato fries. You need to turn them, you know, but that's a great way to make those. And then any leftover sweet potato fries, what do you think those might be good for?
Leftover sweet potato fries, you smash them up and make something with them. No.
not.
Okay.
Smash them up and make something with them. But if you go ahead and cut those up into smaller cubes, you can make like hash browns for breakfast.
Oh.
Yeah,
okay.
in a couple days. So you want to use your leftovers up within 4 days. You want to store them properly in the refrigerator and then use them up. So that would be one great way that you could use some leftover sweet potato fries.
Is there a difference between sweet potatoes that are, say, that size and great big ones? I've seen great big sweet potatoes.
Difference how? Difference in taste, difference in texture.
Probably in texture more than anything?
Sometimes I think the larger ones aren't really as good. You know, it just depends. It could be perfectly okay. It just depends. But when you think about portion control that we talk about often, I mean, this is a big sweet potato. When you think of portion control, this might be 2 servings here because we want more of our fist. So if I put my fist up here to this sweet potato, it's larger than my fist, so this would be more than 1 serving. So, you know, we have to be aware of that, but it is a healthy, great choice, and you get a lot of vitamin C and you get beta carotene from this sweet potato. So, you know, those can help protect our body against disease. So we want to try to get more vegetables, and sweet potato is one root vegetable that we can easily get any time of the year. Number of ways you can prepare it to enjoy it.
Probably one of the most used root vegetables is an onion.
You're right.
And one of the problems with an onion is you tear up when you cut it.
Right, right. And from my little research that I was able to do on onions, one of the things that I've learned is that it's the sulfuric compounds in the onion that make us cry when we're cutting up onions. And some onions have a larger content, some have less. So, you know, that's why sometimes when we cut up an onion, we don't tear up, and other times we do. But I did find some tips I thought the viewers might really be interested in how to prevent tearing up when using onions in food preparation.
I always found the best way is to have somebody else cut them.
Well, I think that's a great approach.
That's one way.
That was not one of the ideas that I found, but that would be a great approach. So if you have a sous chef in your kitchen,
then you can do that.
You can have them cut the onions. But one of the things, you could simply chill your onions for about 30 minutes before chopping them up. So, you know, I'm thinking sometimes in our local churches, they have big dinners and maybe making a big pot of dressing or soup or something, and they have to cut up a whole bunch of onions. If they would just refrigerate those onions for about 30 minutes before they start chopping, that would help in reducing the amount of tearing one might have in cutting onions.
Really?
Yeah. Okay. So that's a simple way that we can do it. The other thing I found is that if you want to reduce that tearing when you're slicing onions, you cut off the tops and you peel off the outer layers, but you leave the root end intact. So you cut the top of the onion off, you peel off that outer layer, but you leave that root end intact because that's where most of the sulfuric compound is that's going to make your eyes tear. So you can just go ahead and slice the onion down to the root end, you know, and then chop it up, and that should help reduce tearing. The other thing I found out is that, you know, oftentimes if we chop a lot of onions, what do your hands smell like?
Onions.
Yes.
And that stays that way for a while.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, if you want to get rid of that smell, put a little lemon juice on your hands and rub them and then wash them, and that should help reduce that onion smell from your hands.
Okay.
So that's a quick and easy technique.
Yeah, good pieces of advice there.
Yeah. So what do you do when you have onion breath?
You chew gum.
Well, that would help. That would help.
You eat a sweet potato.
You know, one of the things years and years ago, especially when I remember as a young child, and we very rarely went out to eat as a young child, but oftentimes on Sunday we would go out to eat to a local diner and always have a chicken dinner for Sunday after church, and there was always something green on the plate. You know what that green thing might have been?
Parsley.
Yes, parsley. So parsley helps reduce those flavors or odors from your mouth. So if you have onion in your mouth or onion breath, if you eat some parsley, that will reduce that.
And most people just throw that part away, and it's there for 2 purposes. Makes it look good, and it'll get rid of the breath.
Right, right. So those are some tips I found in looking up onions and using onions in the kitchen and how we could reduce that tearing and the smells that we get from onions.
Now you mentioned chilling it in the refrigerator for about 30 minutes. That's not a good place to store onions, though,
No,
is it?
we want to store onions in a cool, dry place. In fact, most root vegetables we do want to store in a cool, dry place. After cooking, we would want to store vegetables in the refrigerator. But before cooking, most root vegetables, they don't like that cold environment.
Now, a lot of times you may not use the whole onion.
True.
But you really can't store that in a cool, dry place, can you? That needs to be put in the fridge. Is that right?
That's correct. After you cut it, you could store it in the fridge. You want to use it up rather quickly. Another thing you can do with onions, Bill, is actually freeze them. So, you know, if you have some onions left over and you're chopping and, you know, you've got that going on in the kitchen, you go ahead and chop those onions. Store them in a zip-type freezer bag. Make sure you reduce all the air in that bag. Label it chopped onions, throw it in the freezer. And then it's ready to go when you're making soup or stew, or you just need to add a little onion to a casserole or to some meat you're browning. You could just throw that frozen onion in and you won't have to, you know, the prepping part, the cutting part is what takes so much time in the kitchen. And I think, you know, we want to encourage people to get back to the kitchen and to cook whole foods and to eat more whole foods more often and to use less processed foods so that we're healthier. And I think a lot of people want to steer away from that because of the prep time, the time it takes. But there's little tips and tricks that you can learn and use and plan to do that will really save you time in the kitchen. And chopping onions ahead, keeping them in the freezer, adding them to your dishes that you're preparing or cooking is one of those time-saving techniques.
Now, sweet potatoes and potatoes, you can like store someplace cool and dry. How long can you do that? How long will they last? Does it depend on where you keep them, or is it?
It does, and it depends upon the area that you're in. Most sweet potatoes, in my reading, it was up to 2 months.
Wow.
At room temperature for a week. So if you want to leave your sweet potatoes out on the kitchen counter, you know, as long as it's not a real warm kitchen area, you could leave it out there for about a week, but up to 2 months in a cool, dry place.
Okay, we should have 2 orange vegetables.
Yes, you should.
Does an orange count as an orange vegetable?
No,
or fruit?
orange is a fruit.
Okay, so it has to be a vegetable.
Yeah.
2 orange vegetables a
Yeah.
week at least. Sweet potatoes and carrots, that's your choices.
Those are 2 of our choices, yeah.
Well, 2 really good choices.
Yeah, and a number of different ways that you can prepare them. And you know, carrots you could eat raw, you could eat in salad, you could saute, you could eat them cooked, you can boil them, you can roast them. There's so many different ways that you can prepare carrots.
Carrots are pretty versatile.
Yeah.
Jan, thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you, Bill.
Hope you learned something about sweet potatoes and onions. Thank you for watching WJTS-Inform. Our guest has been Jan Dougan. She is the Extension Educator for Purdue Extension in Du Bois County. She comes in on Wednesdays on WJTS-TV, and I hope you enjoy the shows that we do together. Thanks for watching. We are local people watching local people.